400,000 years ago, something happened that changed the entire trajectory of human evolution. And it wasn't a new tool or a new weapon. It was control over fire. Not just using fire when lightning happened to start one, but actually keeping it alive, feeding it, and carrying it from place to place on purpose. And the species responsible for mastering this wasn't modern humans. It was Homo erectus, an earlier relative of ours, with a smaller brain, a sturdier body, and a life that looked nothing like the version of prehistory most people picture. Let's start with what the evidence actually shows, because this isn't guesswork. At sites like Qesem Cave in Israel, archaeologists have found repeated hearths layered on top of each other in the same spot, used again and again over an enormous span of time. Researchers have identified distinct layers of ash and burned bone at this exact location, built up over what appears to be tens of thousands of years of continuous or near continuous use, all centered on the same specific spot inside the cave. That kind of repetition tells us something important. This wasn't an accidental fire. This was a maintained, managed part of daily life. Similar evidence comes from Gesher Benot Yaakov, also in Israel, where burned seeds, wood, and flint, dated to roughly 790,000 years ago, suggest fire use stretching back even earlier in some regions. So by 400,000 years ago, fire wasn't a novelty anymore. It was infrastructure. Now picture an actual day inside one of these fire-using groups. Let's call our Homo erectus tall, living in what is now the Levant region, in a rock shelter positioned near a reliable water source and open grassland. The landscape around Tal's shelter is a mix of open savanna and scattered woodland, home to large grazing animals, but also to serious predators that make careless movement genuinely dangerous. The day starts before full daylight, and the very first task isn't hunting or gathering, it's checking the fire. Someone in the group is always responsible for this, because a fire that goes out overnight isn't just inconvenient. It can mean losing days of stored heat, protection, and cooked food preparation in an instant. Tal crouches beside the coals from the previous night, adding small dry twigs first, then slightly larger branches once a flame catches, carefully controlling airflow with cupped hands. This isn't primitive trial and error. Studies of hearth structures at these sites show deliberate arrangement, often shielded from wind by rock walls or shallow pits, showing real understanding of how fire actually behaves. Once the fire is stable, attention shifts to food, and this is where fire genuinely rewrites the story of human biology. Raw meat and raw plants take an enormous amount of energy to digest. Cooking changes that equation completely. Heat breaks down tough fibers and proteins before they even enter the body, meaning less energy is spent digesting, and more energy becomes available for everything else, including a demanding, growing brain. Many researchers, including primatologist Richard Wrangham, have proposed that this shift toward cooked food may have directly enabled the increase in brain size we see in later human evolution. The brain is an extremely expensive organ to run, consuming a huge share of the body's total energy, despite its relatively small size. So any extra energy freed up by easier digestion could plausibly have been redirected towards supporting greater cognitive capacity over many generations. It's worth being clear that this remains an active area of scientific debate, and not every researcher agrees on exactly how much cooking alone contributed compared to other factors. But the timing lines up in a genuinely compelling way. In other words, this fire wasn't just keeping Tal warm. It may have been quietly reshaping what human bodies and brains were capable of becoming. Over the fire, strips of meat from a recent kill are laid across heated stones, while roots and tubers are pushed directly into the ash to slowly cook through. The group eats together near the fire, And this daily gathering point does something else important too. It creates a natural center for social interaction. Fire extends the useful day well past sunset, giving groups extra hours awake together in a shared space, which many anthropologists believe likely encouraged more complex social bonding and possibly early forms of communication. After the morning meal, part of the group heads out to gather plants, roots, and firewood, while others begin working on tools nearby, close enough to the fire to use it directly in their work. This is another detail that surprises people. Fire wasn't only for warmth and food. It was also a genuine tool-making technology. Heating certain types of stone before knapping it can actually improve how the material fractures, making it easier to shape into sharper, more controlled tool edges. This technique, sometimes called heat treatment, has been identified through microscopic analysis of stone tool surfaces at several sites, showing telltale changes in the mineral structure that only happen when the stone is exposed to controlled heat before being worked. Wooden spears were also selectively fire-hardened, with the tip carefully charred and then scraped, a process that measurably increases the wood's hardness and durability for hunting. A remarkable example of this comes from Schöningen in Germany, where remarkably preserved wooden spears, dated to roughly 300,000 years ago, show clear evidence of this kind of careful, fire-assisted craftsmanship. By midday, the fire has also become useful for an entirely different reason: protection. Homo erectus shared the landscape with genuinely dangerous predators, including large cats and hyenas capable of preying on humans directly. Fossil evidence from this era in some regions even shows predator tooth marks on hominin bones, a stark reminder that early humans weren't automatically at the top of the food chain the way we tend to assume today. Fire at a shelter entrance acts as a natural deterrent, since most predators instinctively avoid open flame, giving groups a significantly safer place to rest, sleep, and raise young. This single advantage may have allowed Homo erectus groups to occupy cave and rock shelter sites more permanently and more safely than earlier hominins ever could. As afternoon continues, some group members return with gathered food, while others bring back fresh fuel, deliberately collected and stored in advance for the coming night. This kind of forward planning, gathering and storing wood, specifically to maintain fire through darkness, reflects a level of foresight that goes well beyond simple moment-to-moment survival instinct. As the sun begins to set, the fire becomes the clear center of the group once again, its light extending visibility and safety well beyond what natural darkness would normally allow. Children in the group stay close to the flame, likely observing and eventually imitating fire-tending behavior long before they're trusted to manage a fire independently, passing the skill down exactly the way tool-making knowledge was passed down. As night fully falls, most of the group settles near the fire to sleep, while at least one person remains at least partially alert, tending the flame through the night in careful shifts. This nightly fire watch likely became one of humanity's very first organized, cooperative responsibilities, a task requiring trust, coordination, and shared commitment to the group's survival. So what did fire actually change? When you step back and look at the bigger picture, it changed diet by unlocking far more energy from food through cooking. It changed biology, potentially enabling the brain growth that defines later human evolution. It changed technology by improving tool-making and weapon durability. It changed safety by pushing back dangerous predators and expanding where humans could safely live. And it changed society by creating a shared gathering point that extended the day and likely deepened social bonds within the group. All of that from one core skill, control over fire, sustained deliberately 400,000 years before anyone would ever write down what it truly meant. It's worth sitting with that for a second. Long before language as we know it, before agriculture, Before anything resembling a city or a written record, this one behavior was already quietly setting the trajectory for everything that came after. The next time you strike a lighter without a second thought, remember that tiny flame represents one of the single most important turning points in the entire story of what eventually made us human. If you want to see what happens when two different groups of early humans meet for the very first time, subscribe, because that encounter shaped far more of our history than most people realize.